Good morning, Market Chameleons, and everyone joining us for the first time. Thanks for coming out and checking the pre-market webinar. Before we get started, please take a look at the shared disclaimer. Be aware that neither Market Chameleon, Dimitri, or myself are registered investment advisors or a broker-dealer. This show is for informational purposes only concerning Market Chameleon tools and products. If you're looking for investment advice, please reach out to a licensed professional. Good morning, Dima.
Good morning, Will. How are you?
Good. And today we're going to look at large volume bursts using the
Yep,
Chameleon.
yep. And good morning. I'm going to share my screen here. And what we'll do is today we'll switch it up a little bit and talk about stock analytics and how we could use those stock analytics, even to apply to option trade strategies or option trade ideas. And I think what we'll do is talk about stock volume bursts and what they are, and then we'll go to a screener. How do we screen for these large stock volume bursts? And I'm going to start out looking at NVDA. So just to get to this page, I know we have this question, but if you go to, stock symbol, let's say, and I'm going to type in up top NVIDIA, I think you'll end up in the summary page. Okay. Once you're in there, go to price action. And in the price action, you're going to have these summary statistics. But for our purposes, we're going to go here to the right. And under trading hours, we're going to pick this VWAP table. And what this VWAP table does is, let me just close this menu to the left to expand our screen. The VWAP table produces summary statistics minute by minute. It allows us to analyze the trading volume and activity on a more granular level, because if we look at it minute by minute, we could kind of glean and get better insights what may have happened during the trading hours, in particular periods or particular unusual events that we could spot for that time frame, for a 1 minute time frame. Okay, because a 1 minute time frame, it's a small time frame when you're looking at the entire day, and you want to see, well, was there anything unusual at any part of the day? What may have happened? Can I analyze this further? So for this purpose, we're going to look for an unusual volume burst. So a big trading activity unusual for that period of the day and for, in a 1 minute period. And to do that, we keep statistics for each stock. So each individual stock has different trading, volume profile, trading volume. And even within that stock, what you'll see is that the volume throughout the day can change. So in the beginning of the day, you'll usually see, larger volume. The middle of the day, the volume will go down, and then by the end of the day, the volume starts to go back up again. That's typical, but we keep statistics for each stock, and then we could compare those to today's trading volume. And over here, you see for NVIDIA for each minute. So this ends at 4 o'clock. These are regular trading hours. But for each minute, we see the volume of the stock, total volume traded, the dollar value of all the stock that traded for that minute. We have the VWAP price, which is the volume weighted average price, because in 1 minute, you could have different trading prices. Right? You have a whole minutes of trading, but we weight that by the volume of the trade. All right, so if a lot more traded at a particular price, it's going to get more weighting than, if a million shares traded at, $100 versus 100 shares at $101. So the $100 gets more weighting because way more shares traded at that price. And then we track the VWAP price relative to the previous minute to see what happened. Did the VWAP price move higher or lower? Was the tick higher or lower? So we have the volume and the price impact from that volume, right? Well, now that we have these stats, we look into our database and say, well, for this particular minute, was there anything there we could tag that was unusual or something to analyze? And this is here where we list the volume and price bursts. Okay, so for our purposes right now, we're just going to look at the volume bursts. And if the volume was significant in that minute relative to what it usually is, and I think we have to look at maybe, let me see, I think it's like 2.8 standard deviations away from a big volume burst. We'll list it here. And we'll say, okay, there was a buy burst. If the volume exceeded that threshold, it's a burst. And once we see the volume burst, we want to know, well, what was the impact to the stock, to the VWAP, right? To the stock price, volume weighted average price. If the stock moved higher, we'll call it a buy burst. If the stock moved lower, we'll call that a sell burst. So for convenience, that's what we'll just call it, either buy burst or sell burst. And that indicates, two things: if the volume was high and the stock moved up, or if the volume was high and the stock moved lower. So now that we have these by minute, we could analyze it in different ways. We could look at the individual minute. We could see if anything unusual happened in that minute. Like over here, we'll put notes if something unusual happened. But for today's demonstration, we're going to analyze these bursts in aggregate. Okay, so we see what happened throughout the day. And now let's aggregate all the buy bursts versus the sell bursts. All right. So over here, we see that in NVIDIA had a total of 9 buy volume bursts. So unusual volume in that particular minute, we see 9 of those, and those were all on an uptick. We called that a buy burst. So what was the total dollar value of all those bursts? That's this $1.3 billion. $1.3 billion worth. What was the total VWAP price, volume weighted average price of those? $146.14. What was the average price impact? All right, when the stock goes up, it could go up, on each burst by a lot or by a little, and that tells us the liquidity of those. So that on average is 12 cents. Now let's compare that to the sell volume burst. On the sell side, we had a total of 4 for a total dollar value of $597 million. And for a VWAP price of $146.46. And since it's a sell burst, it's a downtick. On average, those downticks, the price impact was down 11 cents. So just comparing those, we see on the day that the imbalance is towards the buy side, right? Just eyeballing it and looking at that aggregate, that $1.3 billion worth of buy bursts versus $600 million worth of sell bursts around. So obviously the buy burst, there was an imbalance towards the buy side. And we could also compare it on average. What does it look like per day, right? So if we looked at the last 30 days, let's just compare it to a benchmark last 30 days. On average, you could see that there were 4 buy bursts on average with almost $1 billion worth of stock. So you can see that today is a little bit higher. And if we did it for the last 30 days for an average price of 138.81, average up to 19 cents, versus sell bursts, 6 on average, $1.4 billion worth of stock for an average price of 137.87. And if you go back in history, we could actually just go over here and look at the history of these. But let's stay here. And just from looking at yesterday's alone, that, you know, it looks that it's not hugely unusual, because the numbers here on the buy look close, you know, but maybe something to look at further. But in aggregate, it does look like it's slightly more towards the bullish side of things if we had to compare it. And when we look at these volume bursts, what we're really trying to see is that what is that we're isolating a particular activity throughout the day. That's what we're trying to analyze. We know that there's lots of trading going on. Some of it, you know, it could be just related to VWAPs. It could be related to, you know, program trading. It could be related to just retail trading, regular trading. But we're just trying to isolate this particular type of, you know, behavior, so it can analyze it in isolation. And this kind of we want to see where there's like a conviction, right, in a trade, because what a volume burst, there could be reasons for it too. We should look at it, because it could just be part of a bigger program trade in the market. It could be maybe reaction to some news, but we want to see where there's a big liquidity taker, right? When you take a lot of liquidity very quickly, you're kind of committed to that trade, because the larger the stock that you acquire and unload, the harder it would be to unload it as well, because you'd need to find that large liquidity. Now that we have it, what if we wanted to use a screener for this? We have this for a particular stock, but what if we wanted to look at the overall market and screen out this behavior to see, you know, if there's some stock out there displaying this unusual type of behavior, and I want to analyze it more, like, why is there so, you know, an unusual amount of buy bursts or sell bursts? And it could be sometimes, keep in mind, you know, when you get closer to earnings, you might see them, or out of earnings, because people are moving positions around there. But let's say we just wanted to screen out this unusual behavior. We could use a screener for that. Okay, so under stocks here, if you go to the right, volume burst screener, see volume burst screener here under screeners, and you will end up on this table over here. And up top, we have different filters to narrow things down. And on the bottom, we have these statistics. So I'm going to go from left to right to read the statistics. And here we have the stock symbol, stock name, market cap of the company, the price that the company's trading at, and the percentage change in the stock price on the day. So I'm going to sort these by market cap. So if you click on this column, this will sort by market cap, lows to highs. Let's go highs to lows. So now we got NVDA up top with 3.6 trillion market cap. This is the stock price, percent change. So let's keep going now. So first, let's isolate the buy volume burst. This is what it's doing in the sell volume burst. So on the buy side, we could see what we just saw in the VWAP table. There was a total of 9 volume bursts for 1.3 billion. And how does that, on a relative basis, right, measure up to, a daily average? So this is saying it's 1.4 times its daily average buy burst. So remember, we looked at that table. I'm going to go back really quickly. You can see here 1.3 billion versus about 1 billion. So it gives us a relative value just to let us know, okay, is this larger than typical, in line? And then we do the same thing for the sell bursts. What if we said, okay, how many total sell bursts were there? 4. What was the total dollar value of those? Around 600 million. On a relative basis, how does that compare to last 30 days? Well, on a ratio, it's 0.4, meaning if we took the 600 million that we saw today, divided it by the average daily volume, well, that ratio is below 1, so it's less than usual, 0.4, 40%. Then, so over here, okay, that's just letting us know there's a bigger imbalance towards the buy side. If we wanted to look at it on balance, right? Like if we, to make it just easier than calculating in our head, and we wanted to say, okay, how much did the buy exceed the sell, or the sell exceed the buy on the day? So we would take the 1.3 billion and subtract the buy total dollar value of the buy burst minus the total value of the sell burst, and we get this imbalance, 733 million. Right? So that's just an easier way if we wanted to sort that column, or just kind of scan with our eyes, right, for something. So here we see that there's a more lean towards the buy side. In addition, if you're looking for perhaps option volume, if there's also an unusual amount of option volume, what the implied volatility is doing, we do list some statistics on the option volume. So here we're saying that the option volume traded 2.6 million contracts. On a relative basis, if we took yesterday's divided by the daily average using the last 90 days, it's 0.7. So this is saying that there wasn't that high of a options volume on a relative basis. And if we wanted to see, well, what is the implied volatility doing? So we also have an IV rank. That's on a relative basis, it's 67 percentile rank, meaning 67% of the implied volatility observations in the last year. If we use 252 trading days, 67% of the days the implied volatility was lower, right? The rest was higher. It's about 2/3 lower, 1/3 higher. And now we have these stats, so we can then screen maybe for something in particular. Oh, and then we're looking at potential events. So we could see that earnings are coming up in NVDA, and that could explain, an unusual amount of volume bursts as well, because people may be positioning, hedging ahead of earnings based on their analysis. So we could be seeing that due to that event that doesn't happen on a daily basis. Okay. So let's take a look at maybe something unusual that we might be looking for, because we do have all these stocks in here, over 10,700 stocks in this screener. And let's make up a scenario, a thesis, a scenario, and screen out for it and see what we get, right? And let's start with the buy side first. Okay, so we have these filters on the buy side, and we could look at it and we could say I need a minimum of certain amount of buy bursts. At least 1, 2, 3 or more. Okay. Let's do 3 just to see if they repeat. And now we screened it out in at least 3 volume bursts on a day. But 3 may not be a lot. So maybe we want to look on a relative count that today is higher than usual. So let's say that it's 2 times more than usual. We're probably going to get, so over here now in NVIDIA, there are 9 total buy bursts, and that's twice as much as we usually get. Let's just make sure, right? So you can see on average you get 4, today 9, so that's 2 times the average. Okay. Maybe we need a minimum notional, above 50 million, 250 million. But I'm going to say at least, let's say maybe even if there's a small cap stock, we'll look at it, but at least 50,000. So 50,000. And that notional on the buy burst also on a relative basis has to be higher. Oh, wait. Today's notional, so let's do relative notional. It has to be twice as much. Let's do more. Let's do 3 times as much. All right, so there we go. Now we got, let me see how many we got now, 203. And let's say that we also want to see that the price itself, let's say here in Walmart, the price itself is moving higher after this buy burst. So there's like follow through, like there's they take liquidity and there's a follow through that the stock continues higher, right? Because if you take liquidity on a buy burst and then the stock moves lower, that could just indicate somebody got cleaned up, he's done, and then the stock just drifted lower. But here we're trying to see if the taking of liquidity and the stock is drifting higher. So let's say the price of the stock has to be at least 0.5% above that VWAP price. So here we go. So TMO, right, is $509, but the volume burst, okay, it's not listed here. It might be in here, burst details. So you see these tabs here. So you can see that the stock is 509, but if we look at the buy volume burst, the VWAP price was 504.66, which indicates that the stock post that volume burst continued higher, right? That the liquidity was taken and then it was bid higher. So let's come back to this. So now that we got that, let's say we wanted even a stronger bullish indicator. And let's say we see that, okay, a lot of these buy volume bursts, you see relative bases, they're all in red or high. But at the same time, there's a lot of sell volume bursts. So it could just be, something happening in the stock that both sides are, hitting out liquidity, which could indicate that volatility is coming as well, right? That could indicate that maybe that with these kind of big surges, it could indicate that the order book could get thinner, and we could see a bigger move in the stock. But let's stick with this bullish thesis right now, and let's say that on the sell side, we don't want to see these types of behavior, large volume bursts on the sell side. So on a relative, I'm going to leave today's count. I'll leave that alone. But on a relative basis, we're going to say that there aren't that many. It's going to be below, let's say below half. Okay. So now we got 5. All right. So I guess I don't have to go any further, but here's what this is telling us, that in IoT, there were 14 total volume bursts. for $32.8 million worth of stock, which is 4 times greater than its average. On the sell side, we see only $1.1 million worth. So there's only 1.1 million, and that's well below its daily average. So there's an imbalance of 31.7 million. So keep in mind, this is not typical for this particular stock. In NVIDIA, this would be a different story. But now we're kind of tracking a different scenario, right? Because we filtered this out. And let's say, because we're almost out of time, if we like this scenario and we want to look for this type of scenario on a daily basis to see what usually happens, if this could present an opportunity, or we could maybe possibly find a trend. If we like this scenario, we could say, okay, instead of I worked hard at these filters, there's a lot of them here. I'm going to save my filter and give it a name. Let's say I give it a name, large bullish bursts, whatever it is, large bullish bursts. Save it. Once you save it, you could come back here. Here it is, large bullish bursts, and you could select it. So this way you come back tomorrow, the next day, and you want to just check on it. You click on it, and it will present you the filtered items. I'm going to stop right there, Will. And, we could continue on some more examples, moving forward.
Yeah, that's great, D. Thanks so much. Right before the opening, everyone, thanks for joining today. Thanks for bringing this great webinar to us, Dimitri. You have a great day, buddy.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe out there. Have a great trading day, and hope to see you.